Every society is theocratic. The only question is, who's Theo?
Ask me the question again.
Women are the kind of people that people come out of. In the late 70s and early 80s, sodomy was a felony in all 50 states. I'm not a white nationalist. I'm not a fascist. I'm not a racist. I'm not a misogynist.
That's racist! But you said earlier that you want this to be a Christian world.
Yes.
So you want to supplant their religion with your Christian.
Yes, by peaceful means, by sharing the gospel.
You say Christ is Lord!
In a secular democracy, it would be demos, the people. In a Christian republic, it'd be Christ.
Doug Wilson opens up the doorway to Christian nationalism to give left-wing secular media an insight into what Christian nationalism actually is, and much to the consternation of the CNN journalist who was there to interview Doug, it actually isn't what people have been telling you it is. For those who have misgivings about it, I want to dispel some of the myths that have been circulated online and in other places by people who are frankly full of Thanks for joining the show today. My name is Reed Huberman. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Today on the show, I'm going to try to give Christian arguments for cultural events because I believe we're living in an age of bad ideas, and the only cure for bad ideas are good ideas, and the best ideas are found in God's Word. And today, especially, I'm going to try to defend that claim with some rational arguments. Now, before I do that, I have to make sure that you know that today's show is sponsored by our friends over at Sweet and Savory. If you're looking for an online or in-person cooking class experience, you want to learn how to make great food for you and your family, maybe you're looking for a date night. A lot of people are celebrating their anniversaries in August, and this would be a fantastic way to do that. Maybe for a stay-at-home date night if you want to check out their online courses, or if you want to go in person to their classroom to enjoy the experience there. You need to go to sweetandsavoryclassroom.com where you can scroll through a list of all the different experiences they have to offer you and your significant other, your group, or whatever. So go to sweetandsavoryclassroom.com, and when you check out, make sure to use the promo code IndieThinker for a discount on your order. All right, now that we've established that, I want to be a little democratic, more so than I am typically on the show. After all, I'm a benevolent ruler, and I feel like it's time to give you people watching the show a little bit of a choice here. So out of the kindness of my heart, I just want to ask with a show of hands now, who would like for me to start the show with a lecture on authentic Christianity by a screeching feminist, female, progressive Christian who is married to a cross-dressing queer man? Now, who would like to hear a lecture on authentic Christianity from that individual? Go ahead and raise your hands. Anybody? Anybody in the back, perhaps? So nobody. Okay, well, I'm going to show you anyway, so here's that.
I get this comment a lot. Why should the Bible have any bearing on the laws and legislation that are passed? There are plenty of us that don't care what the Bible says. So first of all, I agree that the Bible should have no bearing on our laws. I am a big proponent of the separation of church and state. In a perfect world, the church would be the church and the government would be the government, and there would be no overlap. But unfortunately, we live in a world where Christian nationalists are currently trying to take over our country. And the best way to combat that isn't to say separation of church and state, because they don't believe that. I believe that the teachings of Jesus actually are very progressive. And the best way to combat this Christian nationalism, in my opinion, is to use the Bible against them.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you have any misgivings about Christian nationalism, let me introduce you to the much disliked red-headed stepchild of Christian nationalism, progressive Christian nationalism, because here, April makes no bones about it. She is interested in shoving her version of the Bible down each and every one of our throats, even though she accuses biblical Christians of doing the exact same thing. So if you want to travel down that path, you'll quickly realize something, that progressive Christian nationalism is fake, lame, and gay, and most importantly, not Christian. So once you finally get sick and tired of that, you might have to come back to the realization that this nation is Christian and was founded upon Christian principles, because much to the dismay, obviously, of April, who doesn't seem to know a thing about history, yes, this nation was founded upon Christian principles largely by Christians. So we have our founding fathers saying things like this. George Washington said, "Reason and experience both forbid us to expect that national morality can prevail in exclusion of religious principle." Also, John Jay, the first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, said, "Providence has given to our people the choice of their ruler, and it is the duty as well as the privilege and interest of our Christian nation to select and prefer Christians for their rulers." And then, of course, one of my favorite quotes from John Adams himself: "Our Constitution is made for a moral and religious people, and it is wholly inadequate to the government of any other." Now, how can these men not understand separation of church and state? After all, they're the ones who came up with these ideas. I mean, it's Thomas Jefferson himself who said that there will be a wall of separation between church and state. Except there's one problem here. Most of the people like April that don't know history don't know that Thomas Jefferson didn't write that in the Constitution, and it isn't in the Constitution, but rather in a letter to the Danbury Baptists. Now, guess what Thomas Jefferson was not doing? Assuring a group of Christians that they would have no say in the laws and the governance of their nation. He was actually ensuring them that they would have the religious liberty to do exactly that, because the federal government did not have the authority to stop them. Because the First Amendment gives freedom of speech to all of us, and it gives us the right to know that the federal government will not be able to autarkically try to suppress religion, as our founding fathers had found in the country they came from. So that's why they installed it in our Constitution, to create a nation with the freedom to worship the Lord Jesus Christ without fear of reprisal. Now that is what is meant by separation of church and state. Not that we would create a secular government, or not that Jesus had no say-so in the way a government should be run. So that's why I want to introduce you to Christian nationalism outside of the misgivings and the misrepresentations of many out there who want to talk about the subject but seem to know very little about it. And I think we need to go to the tip of the spear in order to go to the source, and that is assuredly Doug Wilson, who just recently did an interview with CNN. So let's hear what he had to say about Christian nationalism, and then I'll respond to some of the ideas of what Christian nationalism is in popular culture and try to refute some of that. So let's check it out.
Christ Church Senior Pastor Doug Wilson makes no apologies for his beliefs on God and country.
I'd like to see the town be a Christian town. I'd like to see the state be a Christian state. I'd like to see the nation be a Christian nation. And I'd like to see the world be a Christian world.
And now Wilson's controversial views as a Christian nationalist are gaining sway in the nation's center of power with the recent opening of his new church and high-profile parishioners like Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth.
Is planting a church in D.C. part of your mission to try to turn this into a Christian nation?
Yes. So every society is theocratic. The only question is who's theo. In a secular democracy, it would be demos, the people. In a Christian republic, it'd be Christ.
Well, what would you say to someone watching this and say, look, I'm a Muslim. Who are you to say your worldview is better than mine, that your God is better than mine?
Well, if I went to Saudi Arabia, I would fully expect to live under their God's rules.
But you said earlier that you want this to be a Christian world.
Yes.
So you want to supplant their religion with your Christian.
Yes, by peaceful means, by sharing the gospel.
Now, I like this question, actually, because it is the question of our age. By what authority do you have to say anything? So this is a great question. But it also presupposes something, that the Muslim is on equal footing to the Christian when it comes to truth claims. But herein is the rub. They aren't. And Jesus actually has the upper hand here. So if we wanted to have an honest conversation of what should form a nation, then we should be talking about how do we understand what truth actually is. We should be asking that Pontius Pilate question, just not cynically. What is truth at the end of the day? Because our postmodern world doesn't seem to be able to understand it whatsoever. So the idea here is simply that, and Doug does a good job of defending this idea, and I call it, and there may be a more technical name for it, but I call it open Bible theory. And this is the idea that everybody has their Bibles open when it comes to dictating the way that they see the world working. Now, we just saw this with the reel that I showed you at the beginning of this episode. Everybody has their Bible open. Let's quit with the myth of neutrality. There is no such thing. There's no secular person standing in the middle, being an arbiter between the Muslim and the Christian, saying, I will dictate to you what the truth is. No. Everybody has their Bible open, including the secular humanist. The real question is why should the secular humanist have any right to speak to what this nation is? Why should the Muslim? Why should the Christian? And the only answer is the person who has truth on their side has the right to speak to what this nation actually is. Now, here's where we come to a real difficulty in our nation today, because we don't believe that cultures are superior to other cultures. In fact, we have people coming into this nation illegally, and we are told even by our politicians that these people are Americans, even though they've been here for like 1 hour, and they know more about America than even Americans do. So this is the real problem. We're supposed to believe the multicultural lie that all cultures are equal, and America is this big melting pot of cultures, and it's diversity that makes us truly strong, rather than the truth. The truth of America is that we were able to build this nation upon a core set of principles that, yes, are founded in Christian scripture. Does that mean that you have to be a Christian in order to come to this nation? No, it just means that you have to be willing to consent to this loose set of moral principles in order to truly come to this nation. Now, this is a theory that is well-founded in people like John Locke and Hobbes and others, and it's called social contract theory. Now, I don't believe every vestige of this, but I believe at least this simple fact, that if you cannot agree upon a loose set of moral principles by which you govern your laws, and by the way, laws are governed by morality, asking the question, which morality? So if we cannot agree upon the question, which morality, we will finally frazzle at the seams, come undone, and we don't actually have a nation if we can't come up with even a non-verbal, implied understanding of what our society is going to base its laws upon. And this is what we're finding in the present. This is why our nation is steeply in decline, simply because we have rejected Christianity as the mainstay for where those principles are founded, and we've tried to say, you do you, to each his own, and I have my truth and you have your truth. And that doesn't work as a society. That's why the woke revolution has absolutely failed and is embarrassingly now just simply a joke.
Excuse me, it's ma'am. It is ma'am.
So the truth is, when we talk about a Christian nation, we have to have an understanding of something. Our nation is going to be governed by some set of moral principles, and I see no reason, as a Christian, why I shouldn't be able to throw my hat in the ring and say, I believe that time in history and the objective witness of every single Christian on the planet has something to say to the formation of this nation, which is why I am okay with the phrase Christian nationalism. But there are some objections to this term, and we'll get into some of them as this interview goes on.
Parishioners of his church, known as Kirkers, own and operate several businesses downtown, next to liberal college town stores.
If it's true,
Why did he yell boo? Because it's
because of me.
because of you.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
That's a regular day for you.
That's not unusual.
Okay, now I really want to stop there real quick, because when that guy shouts boo, it comes as a shock to this woman. But I also think to even genuine Christians, this comes as a shock. I think they will take this as a mark against Doug Wilson and the goal of Christian nationalists everywhere, because why would a person boo? Everybody is supposed to love the Christian and respect that person. This is simply, and they'll say something like, this is simply because Doug Wilson has ruined his witness in that town. Well, as you saw, that town is actually very woke. It happens to be a college town. And the reason he got booed, I think, is an important lesson for all Christians everywhere. And it brings us back to the teaching of, I think, an important person for Christianity. Now, you might know the name. You might have heard of it before. His name is Jesus Christ. And Jesus said this of his followers, guys, they hated me, and they will hate you also. So you remember this Jesus, right? He's the guy that was crucified, not because he was so just insufferably loving that people just didn't know what to do with him. He's like, this guy tolerates everything so much, and he's so inclusive of everything that we just want to crucify him. That's it. We got to be done with all of this just love that we need to crucify him. No, No, Jesus was crucified, actually, because he stood for truth in a world that was dedicated to darkness. And so he was booed himself. So this is where I have to speak to Christians, and I hope this comes off in the right spirit and in the right heart. And if it doesn't, then I'll give you your money back. The reason very often that you aren't booed when you walk down the street is because likely you have never actually taken a prominent stance on anything. As Cyprian said, if the world is against Christ, then I am against the world. Yes, we want to love the world. Yes, we want to win them. Yes, we want to evangelize them. But you have to understand, if you're actually going to do that, it doesn't mean just simply showering people with Valentine's Day cards. It means telling the truth in a world that loves their sin, which will often make you an enemy to people who are enemies of the truth. And if that isn't happening to you online or in other places, then it might be that you stand for nothing. Therefore, nobody can boo you for anything. Now, I get it. It's possible to be booed because you say something that is worthy of being booed, right? Just because you get hate online, it could be because you said something that is absurd. But very often, the Christian will get booed simply because they say something that is perfectly true. And I would ask you to use booing as a sign, in many cases, as your fidelity to Christ, as I think it was in what you just saw.
A big focus of his Christian movement is on a patriarchal society where men are dominant and women are expected to submit to their husbands.
Women are the kind of people that people come out of.
So you just think they're meant to have babies. That's
Well,
it. They're just a vessel.
No, it doesn't take any talent to simply reproduce biologically. The wife and mother, who is the chief executive of the home, is entrusted with 3 or 4 or 5 eternal souls.
I'm here as a working journalist, and I'm a mom of 3.
Good for you.
Is that an issue
No.
for you?
No, it's not automatically an issue.
Josh and Amy Prince, along with their 4 kids, moved here from Washington State.
Do you see Amy as your equal?
Yes and no. In the sense that we're both saved by grace, we're absolutely on equal footing. But we have very different purposes, God-given.
But do you see yourself as the head of the household, as the man?
He is the head of our household.
He is.
Yes, and I do submit to him.
So like moving here
I was just
was
gonna say that.
ultimately your decision.
Yes.
That's a great
great
example.
example.
Wilson says in his vision of a Christian society, women as individuals shouldn't be able to vote. His fellow pastors, Jared Longshore and Toby Sumter, agree.
In my ideal society, we would vote as households. And I would ordinarily be the one that would cast the vote, but I would cast the vote having discussed it with my household.
But what if your wife doesn't want to vote for the same
Right.
person as you?
Right. Well, then that's a great opportunity for a good discussion.
There are some who have gone so far as to say that they want the 19th Amendment repealed.
I would support that. And I'd support it on the basis that the atomization that comes with our current system is not good for humans.
All right, so there you have it, the most provocative claim that the 19th Amendment should be overturned and that women should not vote, but there should just be one household vote. Now, before we go into some of the kind of specifics of what I think these guys are actually after and something I largely agree with, let me just say that this is something that I'm toying around with and something I'm thinking about. But before we can really have this conversation, we need to push aside all of the straw men that are typically created when it comes to having this conversation so that we can actually talk to each other and not talk to things that we've created. So no, these guys are not interested in trying to shove women in hands-made gowns, and the patriarchy isn't interested in trying to subject and abuse women, and it's not essentially going to be, burqas for women, but in the American West. No. So what these guys are actually after is something that I think is simple and something that I kind of largely agree with, especially as I get older. And I think what they're after is the idea that a family should be joined together in their political decision making, and then they should make those decisions together, and that families are best suited to be able to care for the future of our country. Therefore, there should just be one vote per family. Now, I'll even go a little bit more extreme this and say that I don't think if you are in the position of not having a family, or at least not in the position of having the potential for a family, then you shouldn't vote. And here's what I mean by that. I believe the 19th Amendment is problematic in that we have a bunch of 18-year-olds and 19-year-olds and 20-year-olds who are actually being taught to hate this country and then given the right to vote, and their prefrontal cortex hasn't even fully developed yet. We have other people who probably hate this country and shouldn't have the right to vote. And just because they were born here doesn't mean they love the country. Think about Omar Fateh. Maybe you've heard the name. He's running for mayor in Minneapolis right now. And Omar has already been implicated in multiple anti-American, let's call them plots. So he was implicated in a scheme to steal money from the government, which also benefited him on a personal level for his campaign. He had to give $11,000 back to the government from Feeding Our Future, which was a nonprofit organization made up largely of Somalis, just like him, a Somali. And this organization took money in supposedly to feed people, but all they did was enrich themselves, buy luxury items, and buy cars for themselves. And then there's also the simple fact that Fateh has a brother-in-law that was implicated, I believe, in 2022 for an absentee ballot scam that was trying to drum up votes for Democrats. So my question to you is, should Omar Fateh, who has purposefully shown that he doesn't care about our democracy, doesn't care about holding himself above board, and is now running for mayor, should that guy have the right to vote?
How about no, Scott? Okay.
The only people who should are the people who care about the future of this nation. And who are those people except the ones who, in principle, have the ability to reproduce? They're the ones who have the most dogs in the fight. They care about the future of this nation because they're going to be sending their offspring, their progeny, into whatever nation they create. So that's my proposition. Just that there should be families voting, and that there should be one vote per family. Now, I realize there's issues with this, and I'm just toying around with this idea at this point in time, but I think that it is enough of an idea with some meat on the bone that it should be contended with and not given stupid and very often misguided arguments in response that say, well, you're just trying to suppress women, because it has nothing to do with that. It has something to do with what Winston Churchill said. He said this: if you're young and you're not a liberal, you probably have no heart. But if you're old and you're not a conservative, you probably have no brain. Because the older you get, the wiser you get. And the older you get, the more potential you have to actually have kids. And as you start to think about what kind of world you're sending your kids into and the wisdom that you've gained through life experience, it starts to change the way you vote. And I think that would best secure a better America for all of us. And that's what I'm after. At the end of the day, I hope you are too, even if you disagree with that. But there's one more provocative claim that I think is worth investigating as they jump into kind of the accusations that Christian nationalism is after an ethno-state. So here's that.
Wilson's influence spans the globe with more than 150 churches. Lennox Califungwa moved to Moscow from Africa.
It's really because I wanted to be a part of a community that was doing something, and especially in building Christian institutions.
Are there other black families in this community?
Oh, absolutely. There's a few black families.
Wilson maintains all are welcome to his church.
I actually love that interview with that guy. Are there other black people here? I'm surprised she didn't start the interview with, hello, token black. I mean, I'm sorry, what was your name again? These left-wing journalists, honestly, are so erudite and elitist that if they don't see a black person clamoring for Section 8 housing or robbing a Walgreens, they really just don't know what to do with themselves, because, of course, all black people are just candidates for their bleeding hearts to try to give you a little bit of EBT action, some food stamps. That's why black people exist, for liberals to come alongside and help. But they don't actually have personal agency that would produce a guy that would come from Africa, largely a Christian continent and with many Christian countries, that would come to America to be a part of a Christian nation. So her surprise is totally unsurprising to me, and it should be unsurprising to you, because many of the claims that actually Christian nationalism is just after a religious ethno-state. It's the ground workings for kinism, and that's what this is really all about. And of course, kinism is the idea, as the name suggests, that you just want your kin. You just want people who are in your tribe to occupy your nation. Birds of a feather flock together, in other words. And only white people are going to be allowed in this Christian nation. And this is where we have to push aside many of the misguided and, frankly, the lies that have been told about Christian nationalism. Christian nationalism is not the idea that if you're not a Christian, you can't come to America. You can't migrate to this country. You're not allowed to be here. You will be forced to convert if you're here and you're not a Christian, Or we'll institute like another Spanish Inquisition or something like that. Or that you'll be kicked out of the country if you refuse to convert to Christianity. And of course, that often comes with the idea that we just want a white European ethno-state. That's really what this is about. It's about the fact that these people hate brown people. Okay, that is obviously a lie because of what you just saw. It has nothing to do with the color of anybody's skin, but it does have to do with their ethics. So in other words, it's not their ethnicity, it's their ethics. What we want is an ethic state that is founded upon principles that are good for the flourishing of all of humanity. So it's not about kinism, and Doug Wilson has gone on record time and time again to condemn kinism. It's not about not making interracial marriages or making interracial marriages illegal. That's not what a Christian nation is after. And by the way, if it were, the guy that's defending Christian nationalism right now actually would not only be a hypocrite, but I would be spoiling the gene pool. I would have absolutely degraded this white European ethno-state with my progeny because my kids are half Mexican and they have beautiful brown skin. One of them has beautiful brown eyes. The other one got my eyes. Hazel, which still beautiful, by the way, as you can tell. But I myself would be a hypocrite because I don't believe in the idea of banning interracial marriage because it's not part of what being a Christian nation is. What is important to a Christian nation is founding the ideas for your ethical framework upon something other than your arbitrary whims and desires, other than your pure hedonistic pleasure, which has clearly created OnlyFans and other very dumb things. It's building a nation upon a firm set of ethics and values that are sturdy enough to hold a nation together. And even if you're not a Christian, you should be honest enough to appreciate the fact that Christianity stands above all the other major religions of the world in order to be able to do exactly that. Now, in closing, I want to speak to three kinds of people. And the first kind is the person who is ignorant of history entirely and wants to rail against Christian nationalism because they just have a blind hatred for Christianity. Now, I'm sorry if you feel excluded from the Christian movement and you really, really want to be a part of the club. Maybe quit trying to figure out ways to stick your sexual organs where they don't belong, and then we can have a conversation. But by the way, if you're mad about that, your problem isn't with Christian nationalism. Your problem is with God and the Bible. And I can't really help you with that. I can only encourage you to get rid of your blind hatred towards Christianity and actually reassess what Christianity is really all about. And then I think you'll find that it produces pretty darn good nations that are good for all of us. And then the second kind of person is a person that I have no love for and frankly is more dangerous than the first kind of useful idiot. And that's the person who knows exactly what they're doing. They want to destroy America, and they know that one of the linchpins of the American experiment is Christianity. So if you can get rid of Christianity, you can get rid of normative society and you can destroy America, and then you can build whatever you want to in its ashes. These are the people who want to demoralize society. You know, they want to redefine truth. They want to redefine gender and redefine everything they can put their nasty little fingers on. And they want to demoralize a society because once a society gives up God and gives up a moral framework, then you can convince them of anything. They're incredibly compliant and incredibly easy to control once they have no morals that undergird them, that supersede whatever government you want to try to create. In other words, when there is no God, the government becomes your God. So these kind of people, they're destructive deconstructionists, and I don't have any love for them whatsoever, and they should be called out for what they are, a bunch of Marxists. But there is a third kind of person that I think deserves a little bit of attention, and that's the misguided Christian. That's the Christian who says, when I look at Jesus in the Bible, he didn't create a nation, so why are you trying to create a nation? These are people who don't realize that Jesus had 3 years here on this earth with his disciples to turn them into Christians so that then they could go out into all the world and do what? Turn all the world into Christians. So ultimately, these are just misguided people who need just an urge in the right direction. And that's who I want to speak to in closing. So just know this, it's natural to want to live around people with a shared culture and even a set of moral principles that dictate their laws. Moreover, a government is supposed to secure the good of those who are governed. If you're a Christian and you don't think that has anything to do with Christianity, then I have to tell you, you stink as a Christian. What's better than Christian ethics and values? Please tell me. I would love to know for society. I know the opposite of that scenario, and well, it sounds like hell. If you disagree with this at all, please, by all means, scour the map. Find a nation that you would like to pattern America after, or whatever hypothetical nation you want to build. Once you realize that the most peaceful, prosperous, and flourishing nations on the map are majority Christian, you might have to ask, well, why is that, I wonder? If you're an honest person, you won't say that's because Jesus taught us to indiscriminately love everything and tolerate everything, and sit back while secularists define what good is for all of us. I hope you'll agree that Christians have a right and a duty to define the good for society, like Christian men of old did, and men of old who refused to turn Jesus into their own little personal God because they believed that their religion should be quiet. You know, turning Jesus more into a trinket than anything that you get to pull out every time you want a new car or a new house, but ultimately that you just keep to yourself. I mean, could you imagine having a cure for cancer and doctors making reels online about it, telling others how we should just keep it to ourselves? Jesus has the cure for the soul, and I can't help but think that's kind of important, enough to shout it from the rooftops and not just from within the comfort of our own churches. And I know who's interested in that design anyway. If the God of Holy Scripture be worthy of worship, then you should see the world as Abraham Kuyper did when he said, there is not a square inch in the whole domain of our human existence over which Christ, who was sovereign over all, does not cry, mine. When you agree to that, it might be high time that every Christian quit making the lame and tame arguments for why everyone else can say what America is except for Christians. And it'll be high time that you busy making this nation and the world more Christian for His glory and for the good of man. All right, thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if this show was beneficial to you. You'll love becoming a member over at anythinker.org/support, where you can gain access to exclusive perks like ebooks, audiobooks, movies, documentaries, and so much more. So go to anythinker.org/support to do that. Don't forget to check out the sponsors down below in the description of this podcast, but most importantly, go with God.